Yes, I know I'm late with this vid. I'm going to punish myself by watching endless reruns of the Penguins losing to Montreal in the bubble. Speaking of bubbles, that's what the NHL is dealing with due to a massive salary cap crunch. New blood has been infused by means of young talent on ELCs. Most of the vets either defected to Europe or retired. Not to mention introducing the dreaded enemy of every hockey purist: sponsors on the jerseys. Even then, there are storylines aplenty in the NHL. Pray I get this done before December. Will this group manage to find consistency? We know there's potential, we saw it in the first half last season. But then came the horrible collapse. And if that wasn't bad enough, this year will be the beginning of life without Ryan Getzlaf. In his place, a bunch of former New York Rangers and John Klingberg. Signed to Taylor Hall and fired his agent because he failed to secure a bag in free agency. The hope is that the infusion of veteran talent with a developing core will give Anaheim enough depth to make it back to the postseason. As long as John Gibson plays up to his reputation, they should have a shot. They'll be able to do that this year, right? The tanks are still rolling along here. There's a Connor Bedard to fetch in the draft lottery. No point in being good this year. The Yotes have moved to Tempe to play second fiddle to a college hockey team, while charging exorbitant prices for the privilege of going to their games. Well, if people are willing to buy tickets, then who am I to complain? One question, though. Why is Jacob Chychrun still rotting away in the corner? Do me a favor, don't let Dylan Guenther end up like this. Who said that boys' clubs were out of style? In Boston, it's a way of life. Cam Neely and Don Sweeney failing to understand anything they've done is wrong and throw Bruce Cassidy under the bus for their failure. Such a glorious return to insular thinking deserves great rewards. We kinda knew Patrice Bergeron wasn't going anywhere but Boston. He's back for another go-around at dominating discussion for the Selkie. But look who's home from Europe. That's right, Uncle Krejci. He's still damn good despite his advancing age. Sure, a good chunk of the core is out with injury to start the year, and Pasta's a free agent after this season, but those issues aren't important. It's keeping Jeremy Jacobs comfortable, even if there are questions throughout the roster. This is the most optimistic the Sabres organization has been since... I honestly can't remember. That's how much of an odd feeling it is. Don't think of this as a ringing endorsement. There is still much work to be done. However, they're making progress. There's legitimate structure starting to be built. Young prospects like Quinn, Power, Middlestad, Peterka, Dahlin, and UPL continuing their progression in the system is key. Everyone's been signing their young players to long-term contracts this offseason. And Buffalo feels good about Tage Thompson and Matthias Samuelsson. Although I don't know if I would have done that to Samuelsson after about 60 games. Expectations aren't high, but progression is anticipated. Don't let the fans down. I clamored for years that Calgary had to overhaul their core if they had any chance at reaching their potential. With Gaudreau and Tkachuk out, they had no choice in the matter. This offseason, Brad Treliving took a shit situation and totally redeemed himself. The core has been successfully overhauled. And the Tkachuk trade welcomed Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar into the fold of positions of need. Say their contracts are expiring after this year. Not anymore, they aren't. You know who else isn't? Cup champion Nazem Kadri. A 7-year deal for a physical player in his early 30s may end ugly, but the time is now. Jacob Markstrom's in peak form. They showed flashes of brilliance last season. Will they be able to recover from losses in the core? Or will it be the fix they needed? If only those fixes could also repair the arena that's apparently falling apart at the seams. We're so close to starting construction on that new arena, too. Last season was a gut punch. All the pieces to make a deep playoff run. Yet the goaltending duo known for being injury-prone ended up suffering injury in the end. It's a bummer, they did well. However, Carolina had other issues to address. Big free agents leaving, and a potentially massive void in the locker room. The key for the Canes offseason was to bring in veteran influence. Brent Burns for the back end, and Max Pacioretty for the forward core. When he eventually comes back from injury. There is still optimism about in Raleigh, but there are serious questions that need to be answered. Is an Anderson-Ranta goalie tandem going to hold up for a full season? Will the young talent continue to blossom into their upside? Will they finally live up to expectations in the playoffs? The Canes are just treading water for now. April is their true test. It's time to pay for the sins of Stan Bowman, kids. The offseason moves they made all but confirmed it. You thought last year was rough. Get ready to deal with a tank that harkens you back to the final days of Dollar Bill. If I were you, I'd say my final goodbyes to Kane and Taves. There's a good chance they won't be around here for much longer. To be fair, I don't blame them for wanting out if they have the chance to. Poor Seth Jones demanded a trade out of Columbus only to end up in an even shittier situation. Welcome to the age of cup defense, Colorado. Like many before you, the challenges ahead will be more daunting than they were when you were trying to chase the rainbow. The suitors you were competing with for the bride, they're coming for your head now. And while you spent the summer celebrating your successes, the cup tax has come a-knockin' for payment. In this case, roughly everyone got paid. Mainly Lehkonen, Manson, Nichushkin, and Nathan McKinnon, who was paid a private military company for his services in the future. This still feels like a gross underpay for what he brings. They also lost a few pieces from this run, but perhaps Evan Rodriguez can help assist in keeping form. At least keep the seat warm for Gabriel Landeskog. If he can, that's always a good thing. Now, how does that goalie tandem work out with Georgiev in for Kemper? That'll be the deciding factor moving forward. And 3 months after it happened, the hockey world is still stunned Johnny Hockey went to the Blue Jackets. This is the kind of move that could send shockwaves throughout the NHL. It might take a bit to get there, however. Columbus is very, very young. When guys like Gaudreau and Goodbranson are considered vets of the team, you start to feel old yourself. There is some hype surrounding Columbus, especially with prospects continuing to grow into their roles. And they could very well surprise a few people, but the Metro is too tight to call them a playoff contender outright. You made your statement of legitimacy in the offseason, though. Just keep doing what you're doing. Your time will come eventually. The bridge contract is one where a player is extended for the short term in order to prepare for a big boy deal down the road. To be honest, this is where the stars are to me. They're bridging in between the old core of Ben and Sagan to make way for the likes of Jason Robertson and Jake Ottinger. Unironically, these two also got bridge deals during the offseason. Making the playoffs last year saved Jim Nill's ass. But he knows it won't be enough. He has to juggle building for the future and competing right now, all the while being anchored by a suddenly awful Tyler Seguin deal. He has to deal with a goalie core without Braden Holtby and a defense without John Klingberg. Trading a first-round pick for Niels Lundqvist is a rather bold move, but offers interesting upside. Regardless, I expect the standard first-year Peter DeBoer season. An inexplicable deep playoff run followed by years of middling futility. Stevie's cooking something. I just don't know what it is. You can sense they're trying to build. And there has been some success on the youth front. Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond are just a few examples of that. However, this year is much more pivotal than it looks to the eye. One look at Cap Friendly can tell you why. Alex Nedeljkovic, Dylan Larkin, and Tyler Bertuzzi are set to become UFAs at the end of the year. Rumors about their futures are already starting to swirl in NHL markets. Bold gambles are being made in the effort to push the playoff contending status. The goalie tandem of Nedeljkovic and Ville Husso is the epitome of high risk, high reward. An infusion of veteran forward talent is relatively the same thing. Yes, this team kinda is a fusion of Chicago and St. Louis. The question is, will it work? The high-end talent of Edmonton will do whatever it takes to carry this franchise to relevance. Last year was merely a taste of what the McDavid and Draisaitl alliance can do. They near single-handedly willed the Oilers to the conference championship, and moves to try and find the missing pieces hope to get them further. Goaltending has seen a massive shakeup. The Mike Smith experience has been replaced by the Jack Campbell project. Which version are you going to get from month to month? That's the ultimate question. Either that, or can any attempts to fix the team's lagging depth actually work out in their favor? Unfortunately for them, any chance of Oscar Klefbom coming back has been nixed due to nagging injuries. But the rest of the defense should be able to pick up the slack in theory. There's no doubt that the Oilers will be a dangerous foe. The question is, how dangerous can they truly be? Leave it to the Panthers to make it feel like their first series win in 25 years is insufficient. Florida desires far more than bowing out against Tampa Bay in the playoffs. They have to make an all-in push that may damage the franchise, but can offer greatness if it cashes out. Acquire the unicorn of hockey, Matthew Tkachuk. It cost them a chunk of their core, and there's a chance he may not mesh with Barkov, but it didn't stop them from extending him for 8 years sight unseen. Spencer Knight got signed to a bridge deal as well, but the anchor of the Bobrovsky contract continues to hamper their long-term ambitions, regardless of how he performs in net. We all know that Florida has the talent to go far in the playoffs, but can they manage to fulfill it? If they fail, the repercussions could be catastrophic. Last year was quite the surprise for the Kings. Not that making the playoffs for a former dynasty is really a surprise, but considering that they were still supposed to be on a rebuilding phase means a lot to them. The time to strike is now. The old core is still alive and kicking. Jonathan Quick bounced back in a big way in 2021. LA needs big pieces to show that last year wasn't a fluke. And they did that with Kevin Fiala joining the fray with a nice extension to boot. Even then, the Kings are still very young, and their top prospects are in the process of getting their feet wet at the NHL level. So while Cup aspirations might not be on the table yet, this team can still surprise us all in the right circumstances. Not much else to say. Keep progressing. Will this team ever break out of the hamster wheel? Part of me feels like last year was their best shot to do so. You can't guarantee Matt Zuccarello, Frederick Gaudreau, and Ryan Hartman will repeat their career seasons. You can't guarantee that Marc-Andre Fleury won't suddenly hit a wall like many goalies in their late 30s too. We fortunately can guarantee that Kirill Kaprizov isn't trapped in Russia as many feared he would be over the summer. That alone will guarantee Minnesota will remain competitive. The downside? They still lack center depth. They're banking a lot on the development of Boldy and Rossi. And everyone's wondering what's going to happen to Matt Dumba. Relax, you won't have to worry about anything serious until April. Just focus on making the postseason for now. 2021 really did exhaust them of every resource. The pain after that cup run will continue. Shea Weber's officially gone and Carey Price is trending that way as well. He looked awful due to lingering injury last season, and those issues will more than likely cost him his career. That once massive void has become a black hole. The rebuild will be forced to continue in haste. Just hope this brutal anguish doesn't last for long. Think of positive memories, like acquiring Sean Monahan from the Flames, and forcing Toronto to light the CN Tower in Habs colors. That's all they really have. Nashville still thinks they can make a push. It's cute that they do, but I can see their argument. With Jussi Saros carrying the team on his back, the Preds look solid. Then add to it with Ryan McDonough and Nino Niederreiter. More surprisingly, Philip Forsberg didn't try out the open market and chose to stay, which is a welcoming sign that he likes their short-term future as a contender. The question is, do they have enough to compete with, say, a Colorado? You can argue they're nearly as strong defensively, much stronger in net. But what about at forward? They have nice pieces, but do they have the talent to match? Duchesne's and Johansson's revivals a fluke or a return to old form? And will their youth continue the upward trend? It smells like a Nashville kind of season. Very good. But are they good enough? It's another rebuilding year for the Devils. The young age of their team all but confirms it. Argue with me all you want about their upside, but I can't trust a team that's throwing out Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek as their goalie tandem. Unless Blackwood's going back to 2020 form, they're going to be in hell again. The worst part is that they have some solid talent on the roster. The young core is blossoming. Andre Palat should be good for a year or two before he starts declining. Maybe Dougie Hamilton will stay healthy this year as well. Then you remember Lindy Ruff is still head coach. He's been a dead man walking for 18 months now. What do you think this is, 2006? Mr. Lou Lamoriello, I'm so glad you woke up from your 6-month nap to go over your team situation. That's right, you did next to nothing. You were supposed to sign Nazem Kadri to fill in his second-line center, but you never returned his calls. He fucked off. Oh, so now you try something, Lou. What have you got cooking in the oven? An 8-year extension for Matt Barzal, do you? Well, Long Island's not going to deal with another Tavares situation, but at what cost? You've all but lost what made the Islanders special in the first place. And with the roster you have, I don't know if they have the horsepower to make the runs they made a few years ago. Pray on Ilya Sorokin. He is your only hope. Last year was merely a taste of things to come. The sudden surge to conference finals was mostly on the back of Igor Shesterkin, but more help is on the way. Vinny Trocheck signed to aid the top 6. The great talents of their team returning for another season of prime play. The youth of the squad continuing their hopeful development. Kakko's been kind of disappointing, but he's still serviceable. Lafreniere was showing flashes of brilliance in the playoff run, though. Keandre Miller as well. There's also Vitaly Kravtsov to think about. Perhaps he can finally mesh with the North American game. Anything else I state will be nothing but hot air. This team lives and dies on the back of Shesty. Wherever he goes, the team goes with him. Now, can the Rangers keep up? If they can, there may be a Cup Finals appearance in their future. Sometimes the best moves made are those done off the ice. In this case, it's shedding the meddlesome hands of a past owner that did it. Melnyk has long held back this team from what it could potentially be. And now with the hockey men finally able to make moves not for the sake of simply saving money, it can be done. Infusing the team with talent like Alex DeBrincat and Claude Giroux is a start. Swapping Matt Murray for Cam Talbot, you can call it some semblance of progress for the sake of it. Extending Josh Norris and Tim Stützle long term? I think that's a step in the right direction as well. Playoffs aren't expected yet, especially as there's a huge hole in the defense that Ottawa still has the cap space for. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that Jacob Chychrun is on their radar. Maybe then they'll make some noise. Behold the aggressive retool in all of its half-assed glory. Pissing away a chance at Johnny Gaudreau to keep JVR around and sign Nick Delorier to a modified no-trade clause. Okay, there's also Tony DeAngelo, who should mesh very well on a John Tortorella system. All I can say is that the Flyers probably put a life insurance policy on Carter Hart since he's probably going to die. Philly is simply hoping that injuries were the reason they sucked instead of anything they've done. I've got some bad news for you there. Sean Couturier might be out for the season, and Ryan Ellis may potentially never play pro hockey again. Don't tell that to the boys club out in Philly, though. Everything is fine. Look, they made a good move in extending Travis Sanheim. You can't ask for much more out of them. Pray for that man. He's going to be traded with a second-round pick for nothing in about 4 years. Worst train wrecks to watch are the ones you see coming from a mile away. Perhaps it's the train wreck that's coming to Pittsburgh. This is a team whose last chance at a cup run is more than likely come and gone. But don't tell that to the Panthers. They still think they can make a push. The gang is being kept around until they can skate no more. Noble, but look at teams that have emphasized loyalty over reality. They become the Detroit Red Wings. It's no secret that the Penguins now have the oldest team in the NHL, and it may bite them in the ass as the season progresses. It's not like this team has massive holes in their roster or anything like that. I merely wait for the inevitable reality. The Penguins falling apart, then randomly bullshitting their way to several generational talents. Last year's flavor of the week was throwing massive extensions at defensemen in their early to mid-20s. This year's tulip bubble trend to chase is throwing massive extensions at your extremely young talent to try and buy out free agent gears. St. Louis, you get to be a part of this wave as well. Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou will get the bag, and have a chance at another bag later in the future. The Reigns and Ned are back to Bennington full-time as Husso is gone, but that's not the main concern. The real one is wondering what happens with Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko after this year. I'm confident that O'Reilly will be back, but Tarasenko, considering everything that's happened, I'd start saying your goodbyes. Don't worry, you'll get a playoff run to do so in the future. The Cup window is dead. The team's vision has gone into disarray after a rough season and Doug Wilson's resignation. Awful contracts will continue to wither away and die. Just like the Sharks. This kind of painful decline in death would be palatable if they had a cup to cling on to as they fall into the abyss. Unfortunately, these boys don't have one. There is an outside chance they can make the playoffs, mainly if Erik Karlsson continues to play like he did before his unfortunate injury last season, but that's if a few other teams collapse in the Pacific. I mean, it is possible, but the cynical Sharks fan in me says they'll blow it like everything else. I've seen this movie way too many times to think otherwise. By the way, enjoy the white skates on throwback night. One goal for the year. Just don't suck. You're a newer team, so expectations aren't insanely high, but there needs to be some sort of identity starting to emerge. They brought in pieces like Andrei Burakovsky and Oliver Bjorkstrand just to feel something. Maybe that's why they brought in Martin Jones. He'll at least cause your blood pressure to go up every time he starts. Even if this year is devoting to watching Matty Beniers and Shane Wright, it won't be the worst thing we've seen. That would be Seattle's new mascot. It's like they tried to make gritty, but tried way too hard to make it edgy and in your face. Just took a bunch of trash floating on a pier and threw it together to make this thing. All you needed to do was make something comparable to Cthulhu. The Lightning now have to experience what the Stars and Habs had to experience in their cup losses. licking your wounds after being bested in a series and pay the resulting cup tax from the runs they've had. At least it's young pieces of the core instead of aging vets, but it's a price everyone has to pay in the end. Despite losing the likes of McDonough and Pilates cap casualties, the goals haven't changed from get to the cup again. I don't know what else has really occurred in Tampa that's worthy of talking about. Besides Ian Cole being accused of being a sex pest, but does anyone really want to hear about that? This team win more than 4 games in the playoffs. Until they do, there's no reason to respect them as contenders despite their high-end talent. Last year was unfortunately typical. So this is the part where they begin to panic. The goaltending core has been completely overhauled for an elite tandem. In 2017, Matt Murray and Ilya Samsona. One of the riskiest maneuvers the Leafs have made in recent history in an effort to push them past the inevitable pit. If they can revive the past form, it will be a boom. If they're as bad as they've been over the past few years, it's going to get roughened quickly. This is the last chance for Boy Wonder and his pet Sheldon Keefe. And they know it. If they fail, the only place Dubas will be able to hoard former Sioux Greyhounds is at the local bar. Vancouver's offseason has honestly surprised me. I expected more moving and shaking from them. I mean, their team czar is the trade-happy Jim Rutherford. Instead, more conservative locking up of talent to solidify their core. Brock Besser to a 3-year deal and JT Miller got 8 years. Now if Bo Horvath can be signed as well, it'll be perfect. That's a pipe dream right now, unfortunately. The hope now is to finally be free of the shackles of Jim Benning. With how they were looking at points last year, it might be trending that way. If forward chemistry meshes properly, if team defense takes a step forward, if Thatcher Demko returns to God mode, the Canucks can become something. Although they have one more shackle to free themselves of. Francesco Aquilini. Those allegations made by his ex-wife and kids are pretty dire. If this is true, get the fuck out. Woe be to the Golden Knights. Said no one at this time. Every wound they have suffered as of late has been by their own doing. The once beloved underdog has become the most hated franchise in hockey for a reason. Part of it is how they throw their old core pieces off a ledge. Max Pacioretty, given the Fleury experience by being traded for nothing. I wondered if they'd do the same with Robin Lehner, but he's out for the season with injury. They kinda needed him to solidify their goalie tandem, you know. Unfortunately for you, Phil Kessel is not a solution in anything resembling defense. Regardless of this hate, the goal for Vegas is simple. Win the cup. At any cost. The best years of their window may be past and next to nothing is on the way for them, but they'll keep pushing. For better or for worse, they'll keep pushing. Parallel rival of the Penguins may think they're not falling off, but looking at their trends, it's been happening for a few years now. Despite their aging core and goaltending issues, Washington is doing everything it takes to get another shot at the cup. Last year's awful tandem of Samsonov and Vanacek are gone. In its place is Cup champion Darcy Kemper, signed to a long-term deal in his 30s. His backup, Charlie Lindgren? Don't get me wrong, it's not the worst duo in the world, it's just odd. They're trying a Hail Mary pass to try and salvage this window, and I honestly couldn't tell you if it'll work. What happens with Nicholas Backstrom? He had hip surgery over the summer. Even if you fail, at least you'll hold hands with Pittsburgh as you fall to hell together. Winnipeg is a team that's looking right in the face of a rebuild, but is doing everything in their power to hold it off until the last possible moment. Boys, sometimes the whole situation is so fucked that you need a hard reset just to clear any corruption in the system. The plan was to hire Barry Trotz, but Barry Trotz wanted to take a break from coaching and rejected the Jets' offer. So they got poor man's Barry Trotz instead. On the player front, it's not much better. Dubois probably wants out. Scheifele may be gone if the season goes south. Blake Wheeler's contract is too rough to move outright, but that doesn't mean they can't try to light a fire in his ass. Stripping him of the captaincy, a great way to get maximum production out of your group. To be fair, the only way they're doing anything is if Hellebuck takes them there. That and hope this wave of prospects manages to pan out. For your sake, Jets fans, I hope they do. A hectic October only becomes even more so with the NHL season getting underway. At this point, I've stopped trying to predict how the NHL playoffs pan out. It's become way too unpredictable to make any sort of educated guess. If I've learned anything over these past few years, it's that trying to use logic to make guesses is a fool's game. I only hope that I adhere to these lessons in these shitty videos, but that's a fool's errand.
Welcome back, Brent. And Thank you.